Creation scientists have been saying for decades now that Darwinian evolution is incompatible with real science. It seems that the evolutionists themselves have leapfrogged over this idea and have landed on the premise that evolution is incompatible with reality itself. On August 9th of 2019, Big Think released an article called "Did We Evolve to See Reality as It Exists?" No, says cognitive psychologist Donald Hoffman. It begins with the summary. Cognitive psychologist Donald Hoffman hypothesizes we evolved to experience a collective delusion, not objective reality. The article goes on to explain. Hoffman's hypothesis, which he wrote about in a recent issue of New Scientist, takes it a step further. He argues our perceptions don't contain the slightest approximation of reality. Rather, they evolved to feed us a collective delusion to improve our fitness. Survival of the fittest. And the most delusional? Anyone familiar with Darwinian evolution should recognize the idea that fitness, in terms of survival of the fittest, has nothing to do with strength or speed or intelligence. The only thing that matters is survival. If an organism is alive, it is fit. If it is dead, it is less fit. Remember, this is the theory that says that chickens evolved from dinosaurs. Hoffman seems to have taken the next logical step down the Darwinian yellow brick road and come to the conclusion that the ability to perceive reality is not required for fitness. In fact, he concludes, the ability to accurately perceive reality may be in conflict with fitness. Big Think quotes Hoffman as saying, "Evolution ruthlessly selects against truth strategies and for payoff strategies. An organism that sees objective reality is always less fit than an organism of equal complexity that sees fitness payoffs. Seeing objective reality will make you extinct. If the brain is merely matter." Some years ago, I summed up the religion of atheism in what I call the 15 core tenets of orthodox atheism. This list was what I believe to be what a consistent atheist ought to believe if he starts with the premise that God does not exist and he were to build his worldview on what logically followed. Number 13 was the following. There is no basis for reason or logical thought. If the brain is matter, determined by natural laws, then it cannot choose to accept as true or reject as false any information which it processes. Something known or believed is merely a particular chemical brain state, predetermined by the laws of nature. Intellectual or emotional reaction to fact or sensory input of any kind, including perceived sights and sounds, is likewise predetermined by those natural laws and not by choosing to utilize methods of logic to discover truth, as choice itself is an illusion. Evolution can only create brains which are programmed to result in the survival of the individual, not the determining of truth from falsity. Natural selection can only act on survivability, and this does not require the ability to be logical or rational, only that the formed beliefs and chosen actions result in survival. Cognitive psychologist Donald Hoffman is not only being consistent with evolution, but with atheism. When the foundations are accepted, there are certain logical conclusions. If we are biomachines which evolved by chance, merely by being capable of survival, then the idea that we are capable of perceiving truth is not only superfluous, but ends up being in conflict with the evolutionary faith. If atheism is true, atheists do not exist! The author of the article, Kevin Dickinson, attempts to change course by offering some objections to Hoffman's conclusions. Ironically, in his attempt to escape the atheistic conclusions of Hoffman, Dickinson uses, as an objection, another one of the 15 core tenets of orthodox atheism. He says, then there's the issue of whether Hoffman's hypothesis is self-defeating. If our perceptions of reality are merely species-specific interfaces overlaid upon reality, how do we know consciousness is not simply another such icon? Maybe the I of everyday experience is a useful fantasy adapted to benefit the survival and reproduction of the gene and not part of the operating system of reality. Dickinson accurately identifies the problem that if Hoffman is right, that even our own selves are in question. If we cannot perceive reality, but we perceive ourselves, then how do we know that we are real? On what basis can we still believe that we are selves, and I? Orthodox atheism tenet number 12 is, the perception of a unified self is false. The brain is composed of many parts which work dependently and independently. The part which says of itself, I, is no more the one brain state than a certain program which is running on a computer's screen is the whole computer or all of its programs. In short, if you accept atheism, you have no basis on which to accept the existence of your own self. While Dickinson bristles at the idea, as he should because it's absurd, Hoffman has simply combined two tenets of atheistic faith and has come up with a defeater for his own existence and Dickinson's as well. In an effort to combat the looming threat of his own non-existence, Dickinson seeks outside help in the form of another evolutionist. In his article, Dickinson quotes professional skeptic Michael Shermer, who says, "We know for a fact that measurable consciousness dies when the brain dies. Until proved otherwise, the default hypothesis must be that brains cause consciousness. I am, therefore I think." It ought to be immediately clear that Shermer fails to save the day for Dickinson, as his worldview can only support the conclusions of Hoffman. Human thinking, Shermer is saying, is the byproduct of our physical brains, just as fizzing bubbles are the result of opening a can of Diet Cherry Pepsi. Once the Pepsi is gone, the fizzing bubbles are also gone. Once a brain dies, the measurable consciousness dies. But if our brains are just biomechanical machines following the laws of chemistry and physics, from where come our selves? Once again, the self is not us. It is one of many programs which runs in our head meat computer. Atheism gives no foundation for the self to exist. If evolution is true, we cannot know anything to be true. The conclusion of Hoffman, which Dickinson and Shermer desire to squirm out of, is merely the result of allowing atheism to poison your thinking. By starting with an atheistic worldview, they have built for themselves a religion wherein their own thinking cannot be trusted, especially when evolution is believed to be the means by which our brains originated. In Orthodox Atheist Tenet 13, I conclude, trying to deduce the worldview of atheism from its own starting point. Since the history of mankind is one of uninterrupted religion and belief in the spiritual and supernatural, we know that evolution did not select for brains which are driven entirely by the apprehension of truth, but rather, evolution created brains which believe false premises and fail to process data logically and reasonably so as to come to true conclusions. Because the history of humans is one of consistent belief in religions and superstitions, we know the human brain cannot be trusted to merely discover truth, but can be trusted to embrace falsehoods. Even the logic or reason which is used to reject religions and superstitions is done with those brains, which means the result of such arguments cannot be trusted to be reasonable or true. In short, if you accept atheism, you cannot accept as reasonable any argument for atheism. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. Hoffman may be gaining notoriety for his ideas, but they are nothing new. They are the end result of atheism and nothing more. Once again, the study of the sciences slowly comes to the conclusions which the Bible has been illuminating for centuries. We are made in the image of God, and thus we can think and reason. We are spiritual beings, and so our minds are more than the chemicals inside our skulls. We are born knowing that our Creator God is real and that He has put into our hearts the moral law. We know that our own survival is not the foundation for right and wrong. When we reject the truth of creation, we lose the foundation of thought and reason. As Paul wrote in Romans 1:21 and 22, "Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things." In evolution, men have replaced the Creator God with blind accidental nature, believing that we are made not by the hands of God, but by the random outcome of worms reproducing. Atheists try to steal from the biblical worldview as much as they can, wanting to retain their selves, their morality, the value of human life, and much more. But these things are incompatible with atheism. Atheism provides random chance for a designer, survival is the only foundation for making choices, and chemistry as the only explanation for thought. Eventually, if they continue to follow the foolishness of atheism, they lose their morality, their humanity, and, it seems, their minds. Well, thanks for watching, thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and remember, Jesus loves you.